The first rays of dawn barely kissed the Tiber when unsettling whispers filled the marble halls of Rome. News had arrived from Egypt, a land of golden sands and silent serpents, bearing a tale so harrowing that even the most stoic senators trembled at its weight. Cleopatra's son, Caesarion, was dead. By the command of Octavian, the boy who carried the name of Caesar and a legacy of the Ptolemaic dynasty was executed.
2 Caesars are too many, said Octavian's advisor, his eyes fixed on the scroll. We cannot allow him to live. Rome cannot tolerate a shadow of another emperor.
Yet, amid the calculated cruelty, 3 children of Cleopatra, by Mark Antony, survived. They were taken far from the Nile, placed in the care of Octavia, Antony's former wife, a woman of sorrowful dignity and unwavering resolve. Imagine young Cleopatra Selene, Alexander Helios, and Ptolemy Philadelphus, torn from their mother's arms, sailing across the seas to a land that had once been their enemy.
I will protect them, Octavia whispered, drawing the children close. Though their mother is gone, they shall not taste the cruelty that devours their father's house.
The bustling streets of Rome seemed to hold their breath that day. Every murmur carried the weight of Egypt's collapse. Scholars later speculated, some more cynically than others, that Cleopatra's final act had been a desperate gambit, designed to secure sympathy for her children, casting them as innocents amidst the ruthless ambitions of men. But the truth remained as elusive as the shadows clinging to the Palatine Hill. And what of Caesarion, the boy whose very name bore the weight of empires? Betrayed by Rondon, a trusted servant, he had been delivered into Octavian's hands, hands polished by diplomacy, now stained with blood. Ancient chroniclers record his death in a few stark lines, yet one can imagine the horror. The small body, the unfulfilled destiny, the extinguished echo of a royal line.
The boy. He could have bridged worlds, murmured a Roman soldier, staring at the rippling river. And yet, fate has locked him in shadow.
While Caesarion's life ended in secrecy, the surviving children faced a different kind of uncertainty. Cleopatra Selene, Alexander Helios, and Ptolemy Philadelphus, names once uttered amidst Alexandria's grandeur, now echoed in the cold marble halls of Rome, subjects of intrigue, pity, and the watchful eyes of the empire's rulers. This was a moment suspended between tragedy and survival, a beginning that would shape destinies far beyond the Nile. And as the Roman sun dipped lower, one haunting question lingered in every shadowed corner. Who would command the fate of Cleopatra's legacy? The journey from Alexandria to Rome had been long, fraught with restless nights and stormy seas. Cleopatra Selene, barely 10 years old, clung to her younger brother, Alexander Helios, while Ptolemy Philadelphus trailed, his small hands gripping the ropes of the ship. The Mediterranean stretched before them, a vast expanse of uncertainty, carrying away the remnants of a dynasty that had ruled for centuries.
Hold fast, my children, Octavia murmured, her eyes scanning the restless waves. The world may have cast you away, but you will not be lost in its shadows.
Arriving in Rome, the children were placed in a household that was at once grand and alien. Marble corridors gleamed under the sun, but every corner seemed to whisper of a city that had once been an enemy. Here, they were to learn the customs of Rome, speak its language, and hide the legacy of their mother and father beneath the veneer of obedience and innocence.
These children are heirs not only to Egypt, Octavia's tutor remarked, but to a shadowed past. Every word they speak, every gesture, will be watched by the Senate. They must learn discretion, and quickly.
Days turned into months. Cleopatra Selene displayed a keen mind, absorbing Latin and Greek with a diligence that impressed even the most rigorous scholars. Alexander Helios, spirited and restless, often wandered the gardens, his small frame darting between fountains and statues, dreaming of the Nile that seemed like a fading memory. Ptolemy Philadelphus, quieter, observed silently, his eyes reflecting a blend of curiosity and sorrow beyond his years.
You must learn to speak with your hands as well as your words, Octavia advised, guiding the children through gestures and protocols of the Roman court. Control is your shield, intelligence, your sword.
Yet, the shadow of their past lingered like an uninvited guest. Rumors of their father's defeat and their mother's dramatic end followed them in whispers. One noblewoman claimed, "These children carry a poison in their veins. Royal, but dangerous." Another, more sympathetic, observed, "They are the living memory of two empires, and their hearts are not yet tainted by politics."
"Do they know who they are?" asked a Roman guard, watching the children play in the courtyard. "Or are they shadows of a queen's ambition, kept innocent for the sake of appearances?"
The tension in the household was palpable. Octavia balanced affection with vigilance, ensuring the children grew strong yet cautious. She instilled lessons not only of language and culture, but of survival in a city that could be as merciless as any battlefield. In the quiet evenings, she would tell them stories of virtue, honor, and the perils of power, careful never to reveal too much of the world they had lost, or the enemies who watched them still. And so, amidst the grand halls of Rome, the children of Cleopatra learned to navigate a delicate world of protection and peril. Yet even under Octavia's careful watch, questions lingered. Would the shadows of their parents' legacy ever catch up to them? And who in the vast empire would remember and seek the heirs of Egypt? Rome was a city of whispers and calculated smiles, where power flowed not only through armies, but through subtle words and hidden messages. The children of Cleopatra, though young, were already pawns in a game far larger than any playground they had left behind. Octavian, the man who had ordered Caesarion's death, watched from afar, ensuring that the legacy of Egypt would not rise again to challenge Rome.
"Keep them close, Octavia," Octavian instructed through letters carried by trusted messengers. "They must grow within your walls, ignorant of ambition, yet always aware that Rome watches."
The household became a theater of caution. Every word spoken by the children was observed, every glance noted. Cleopatra Selene, clever and perceptive, began to sense the invisible threads that tied her to the fate of empires. Alexander Helios, fiery and impetuous, sometimes challenged the rules of the Roman tutors, his spirit yearning for the freedom of the Nile. Ptolemy Philadelphus, ever silent, seemed to record everything in his mind, storing the knowledge of allies and threats alike.
Remember, Octavia warned, your mother's story is your shield and your curse. Speak carefully, act wisely, and let no one know your full strength. Rome may seem protective now, but it is patient, and patience can be cruel.
Rumors began to swirl through the streets of Rome. The children of Cleopatra were not mere orphans, but potential threats. Senators whispered that if they grew in knowledge and cunning, they might one day reclaim what had been taken. Others suggested, more darkly, that their mother's blood carried a dangerous charisma that could seduce or manipulate even the most loyal of Romans. One chronicler wrote, "The seeds of Egypt lie in their hands, though Rome thinks them tamed."
"These children, they are not like other Roman youths," a senator confided to a colleague. "Observe them, for they may one day remind us of the Nile's forgotten power."
Despite the shadow of Octavian's gaze, the children found small moments of play and learning, yet always under the careful eye of their tutors. Cleopatra Selene practiced her letters in Latin and Greek, her quill tracing words that felt both foreign and heavy with destiny. Alexander Helios constructed tiny maps of Egypt, whispering to himself the names of cities he had never seen. Ptolemy Philadelphus traced the patterns of the stars, as if the heavens themselves could guide him through this new world.
Learn what you can, and remember what must be forgotten, Octavia reminded them one evening. The eyes of Rome are everywhere, but even a shadow can hide within light.
And so, the children grew under a delicate balance of care and vigilance. The intrigues of Rome surrounded them like walls of smoke, ever present, ever threatening. Each day taught them caution, each night reminded them of loss, and every whispered rumor carried a lesson of survival. The seeds of intelligence, cunning, and resilience were planted, yet the full harvest of their legacy remained uncertain. As the sun set over the city, the children of Cleopatra lay in their beds, dreams filled with the glimmering Nile, the lost city of Alexandria, and the ever-present question: who among the rulers of Rome would finally recognize the power still alive within them? Winter had settled over Rome, casting long shadows across the marble corridors where Cleopatra's children now lived. Though Octavia provided care and protection, the weight of destiny pressed upon them. Every lesson, every conversation, carried with it the subtle hum of politics and the ever-present reminder of their mother's legacy.
Selene, Alexander, Ptolemy, Octavia whispered one evening. The world outside these walls is not gentle. You must learn to hold your thoughts like a blade, sharp, precise, hidden until the right moment.
Cleopatra Selene, now more aware of the currents around her, felt the stirrings of unease. She noticed how nobles and tutors exchanged fleeting glances when she spoke, their words tinged with curiosity, envy, or fear. Alexander Helios, impatient and restless, began to question the rules. His young mind could not yet fully grasp why they were treated as both treasures and threats. Ptolemy Philadelphus, quiet as ever, observed from shadows, storing knowledge like precious scrolls for a future he did not yet understand.
"Remember," said one of the Roman tutors, "your lineage is both a crown and a curse. Speak too boldly, and the eyes of the Senate will mark you. Move too freely, and enemies will shadow your steps."
Rumors in Rome intensified. Some senators speculated that the children might one day avenge their parents, while others whispered that Cleopatra's blood carried a subtle magic, an influence over men that was dangerous even in the absence of power. One historian later recorded, in every glance they cast, one could see the reflection of Egypt, a kingdom lost but not forgotten.
Do not let their whispers frighten you, Octavia reassured them. Fear is a tool, yes, but so is patience. Learn when to bend, when to strike, and when to remain unseen.
As days passed, small tensions began to emerge among the children themselves. Alexander Helios chafed at lessons he found tedious, resisting instructions that seemed designed to confine him. Cleopatra Selene, precise and studious, often scolded him gently, attempting to mold him into the disciplined shadow of a queen she felt compelled to become. Ptolemy Philadelphus watched silently, occasionally offering insights in a quiet voice that revealed a depth far beyond his years.
"Their mother would have been proud," murmured a soldier, watching them practice rhetoric in the courtyard. "Each carries the spark of her mind, yet the world will test them, like no Alexandria ever did."
Even in play, strategy and caution dominated their actions. They learned to read the intentions of others as carefully as they studied the stars or the Latin texts. Their games were no longer simple amusement. They were rehearsals for survival, exercises in diplomacy, and lessons in subtle power. And as night fell over the city, the children lay awake, hearts pounding with curiosity and fear. Outside their windows, Rome slept unaware of the seeds of genius and cunning growing quietly within these young heirs of Egypt. Little did they know, the next storm of intrigue was already gathering, one that would challenge their courage, their loyalty, and the very essence of who they were to become. Spring arrived in Rome, but the air in the marble halls of Octavia's residence was heavy with tension. Rumors of potential uprisings in distant provinces and whispered threats from ambitious senators reached even the ears of the children. Every letter, every visitor, every shadow seemed to carry a hidden meaning.
Listen carefully, my children, Octavia said one morning, gathering them in the garden. The world beyond these walls watches you more closely than you realize. A wrong word, a careless glance, and Rome's scrutiny can crush even the strongest.
Cleopatra Selene, sensing the gravity in Octavia's voice, tightened her lips and nodded. Her eyes, once filled with innocent curiosity, now reflected the calculation of a mind already learning the arts of diplomacy. Alexander Helios, impatient and restless, frowned and looked away, longing for the familiarity of Egypt's sun and sand. Ptolemy Philadelphus, quiet as ever, observed the guards in the distance, noting their positions, their gestures, the subtle signals of authority and vigilance.
The children of Cleopatra are more than they seem, one senator remarked in a private meeting. They are clever, observant, and guided by Octavia's wisdom. If they learn too quickly, they may become a problem.
Tensions escalated as the children began to notice subtle acts of surveillance. Courtiers who smiled too widely, guards who lingered a moment too long, and the occasional messenger carrying cryptic letters all suggested that their lives were under constant observation. Cleopatra Selene started to keep secret diaries, scribbling her thoughts and questions in hidden corners of the residence, while Alexander Helios experimented with minor acts of defiance, testing boundaries to see who would respond.
Knowledge is your armor, Octavia reminded them, guiding their small hands over maps and letters. But even the strongest armor can be pierced if you are careless. Watch, listen, remember, then act.
It was during one quiet afternoon that the first tangible threat emerged. A letter, unsigned but written with precision, appeared on the study table, a veiled warning from an unknown faction in Rome. It hinted at interest in the children's future, subtly implying that their continued presence in the city might not be tolerated forever. Cleopatra Selene read the letter, her young hands trembling, but her mind racing with strategies and questions. Alexander Helios felt a surge of protective anger, while Ptolemy Philadelphus merely observed, absorbing every nuance.
They watch, they measure, they decide. The tutor whispered to Octavia, every move, every word, every laugh. Rome judges them as if they were grown rulers, not children.
From that day forward, the game of survival intensified. Every lesson became a subtle test, every interaction, a puzzle of loyalties and intentions. Even simple walks in the garden were filled with observation and silent calculation. Cleopatra Selene, Alexander Helios, and Ptolemy Philadelphus were no longer merely children. They were heirs of a fallen empire, each step a balance between obedience, curiosity, and the unspoken threat of Rome's eyes. And as night fell, bringing shadows that danced along the marble floors, a single question haunted them. Who in the grand city of Rome would be the first to challenge their quiet strength, and what cost would it demand? The city of Rome hummed with schemes and secrets, and for Cleopatra's children, every day brought new tests. A messenger arrived one morning with a cryptic invitation to the Senate, a private observation of a political ceremony, but clearly a calculated move to measure the children's reactions. Octavia sensed the danger immediately and prepared them.
Remember, Octavia said, brushing Selena's hair back, you are not simply guests. You are observers, learners, shadows among the powerful. Speak little, watch much, and never reveal the flame within you.
Cleopatra Selene's heart pounded as they entered the Senate hall. Marble columns towered over them, and the air smelled of oil lamps, ink, and whispered ambition. Senators in fine togas glanced at the children, noting their presence with barely concealed curiosity. Alexander Helios, restless, leaned toward Selene and whispered, "Why do they watch us like predators?"
Because we are their curiosity and their caution, Selene replied, eyes scanning the room. Watch, learn, survive.
The heirs of Cleopatra, a senator murmured to his colleague. They may appear small, but their eyes betray a cunning that even Rome should fear.
The ceremony began, but the children noticed more than the political display. Subtle gestures, exchanged glances, and whispered words among the senators revealed alliances, rivalries, and ambitions. Selene traced the movements carefully, noting which senators held grudges, which sought favor, and which seemed entirely neutral. Alexander Helios clenched his fists, feeling the tension, while Philadelphus simply observed, his mind cataloging every detail. Suddenly, a minor scuffle erupted near the entrance. A young page had been accused of delivering a letter too late. Voices rose, senators argued, and for a moment, chaos seemed to take hold. Cleopatra Selene, without thinking, moved swiftly to calm the situation, offering a diplomatic word that caught even the adults by surprise. Alexander Helios watched, awe and frustration mingling as he realized the power of presence and words.
Well done, Octavia murmured, squeezing Selene's shoulder. Even in shadows, the cleverest mind shines.
But outside the ceremony, threats were still gathering. Letters, whispers, and secret observations continued, and a shadow from Cleopatra's past, an exiled Egyptian official rumored to bear grudges against the family, had begun to stir. The children, though young, began to sense that survival in Rome required more than cleverness. It required courage, resilience, and the ability to navigate unseen dangers. As dusk fell, bringing the warm glow of oil lamps across the city, the children returned to their quarters. Each step echoed with questions. Who would strike first? What hidden plans were unfolding? And how long could innocence survive in a city so saturated with ambition and subtle peril? The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Octavia's residence, casting long beams across the marble floors. Yet the warmth of the day did little to ease the tension that had settled like a thick fog over the children. Cleopatra Selene, Alexander Helios, and Ptolemy Philadelphus felt the invisible eyes of Rome upon them, and the weight of expectation pressed harder than ever.
Selene, Alexander, Philadelphus, Octavia said, gathering them in the library. There are forces at play you cannot yet see. Words and actions are weapons, and even a smile can betray intentions.
Alexander Helios, brimming with frustration, slammed his hand on the table. Why must we always hide, always obey? We are more than pawns, he exclaimed, eyes blazing. Cleopatra Selene's fingers tightened around a scroll, her calm exterior cracking as she struggled to respond. Philadelphus remained silent, his eyes darting to the shadows where courtiers and guards moved like predators.
Control is survival, whispered the tutor, who had been silently observing. Without restraint, even the cleverest of minds falls prey to the ambitions of others.
Tensions between the children mirrored the dangers around them. Alexander's defiance clashed with Selene's precision and Philadelphus's quiet analysis. Yet Octavia's steady guidance reminded them that unity was their only shield against the unseen perils of Rome. Rumors of spies and exiled Egyptian officials reached their ears, whispering of revenge and hidden plots, fueling both fear and determination.
You must trust each other, Octavia said, her gaze sweeping over them. Divided, you are vulnerable. Together, you are a force even Rome may underestimate.
The children practiced diplomacy and subtle influence, learning to navigate conversations, gestures, and the careful choice of words. Cleopatra Selene, growing in confidence, began to assert herself among tutors and servants alike, demonstrating insight that belied her years. Alexander Helios, restless but clever, discovered small ways to test limits without drawing overt attention, while Philadelphus quietly cataloged every lesson, every observation, storing them like secret weapons.
They are learning, murmured the old soldier, who had watched them grow. Even in play and defiance, they calculate like seasoned rulers.
But Rome's shadows were growing darker. Anonymous letters continued to arrive, each more cryptic than the last, and hints of conspiracies among senators suggested that the children's presence was both coveted and feared. For the first time, the young heirs realized that survival would require more than intellect. It would demand courage, decisiveness, and the courage to face betrayal. As night fell, the children gathered in their chambers, the flicker of candlelight casting long, trembling shadows. Alexander Helios's anger simmered, Selene's resolve hardened, and Philadelphus' mind raced with strategies yet untested. Beyond the walls, unseen eyes watched, and the first real move against them was already underway. One that would test their bonds, their wits, and the very essence of their inherited legacy. A chill wind swept through Rome as the first signs of a conspiracy began to reveal themselves. The children of Cleopatra, now more aware than ever of their precarious position, sensed the invisible forces gathering against them. Whispers in the corridors, hastily torn notes, and coded messages hinted at a plot that had been silently forming for months.
Selene, Alexander, Philadelphus, Octavia warned, holding a letter in her hand. This is no ordinary warning. Someone is orchestrating moves against us. Against you. We must act with caution and intelligence.
Cleopatra Selene's pulse quickened as she read the cryptic lines. Every word seemed to carry a double meaning, a threat concealed beneath the formal phrasing. Alexander Helios paced the room, his frustration barely contained. "Why won't they leave us alone?" he muttered, fists clenched. Philadelphus, ever observant, scanned the edges of the parchment. Noting the subtle marks and stains, evidence that it had passed through many hands before reaching them.
The children are not merely observers. An old senator remarked to a colleague in Shadowed Hall. They are a threat to some ambitions here. The more clever they become, the more dangerous they are perceived.
The children spent the day preparing for contingencies. Cleopatra Selene practiced diplomacy with servants, testing reactions to subtle questions and observing hidden loyalties. Alexander Helios mapped escape routes and safe zones, while Philadelphus devised discreet ways to gather information without revealing their intentions. Each movement, each glance became a calculated step in the delicate dance of survival.
Remember, Octavia reminded them, fear is a tool, but so is knowledge. We must wield both carefully. One misstep and Rome's hidden enemies will strike.
As twilight descended, an unexpected visitor arrived, an envoy from a distant Roman noble bearing a veiled threat disguised as diplomacy. He spoke in measured tones, complimenting the children's education and wit, but the subtext was unmistakable. They were being watched, tested, and perhaps manipulated. Selena met his gaze steadily, her mind racing, while Alexander Helios felt a surge of protective fury. Philadelphus silently noted every inflection, every pause, committing them to memory.
The eyes of Rome are upon you, the envoy said, bowing slightly. Even the smallest misstep could alter the course of your futures, permanently.
The tension was palpable. Shadows lengthened across the marble floors as the children realized that subtle threats were no longer sufficient. They had entered a game of calculated danger. Every smile concealed suspicion, every conversation carried weight, and every step had to be measured with precision. The stakes were higher than ever, and the invisible enemies of Rome were closer than they had imagined. As the night deepened, the children huddled together, whispering strategies and sharing observations. They were no longer simply heirs of Cleopatra. They were young strategists, learning the art of survival under the shadow of political ambition and unseen conspiracies. And somewhere, beyond the walls of their sanctuary, the first tangible move against them was already in motion, promising to test every lesson they had learned and every bond they held dear. The following days in Rome grew colder, both in weather and in spirit. The children of Cleopatra had begun to feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing upon them. Every conversation, every smile in the corridors could carry a hidden meaning. The city, so vibrant and alive to outsiders, had become a maze of shadows and subtle threats.
Do not underestimate them, Octavia whispered, as she led the children through the bustling streets. Even a friend today can become an enemy tomorrow. Remember the letters, and the envoy.
Alexander Helios, impatient as ever, clenched his fists. "Why can't we confront them directly? Why all these whispers and secrets?" he demanded. Cleopatra Selene shook her head, her eyes scanning the crowd. She understood the peril that came with overt action, the delicate balance between courage and recklessness. Philadelphus, quiet and calculating, stayed slightly behind, observing patterns in the movement of Rome's citizens and guards alike.
The children are clever, muttered a shadowed figure in the alley. Too clever to be ignored. But cleverness alone will not save them when the first strike comes.
That evening, the threat became tangible. A servant loyal to Cleopatra's family intercepted a coded message, revealing a planned ambush designed to test the children's reactions and loyalty. Octavia acted swiftly, guiding them through secret passages and safe houses that had been prepared for emergencies. Heartbeats raced as they navigated narrow corridors and shadowed streets, the sound of distant footsteps echoing behind them.
Stay close, Octavia instructed, her hand gripping Selene's arm. Every corner may hide a danger. Trust no one outside these walls tonight.
Alexander Helios led the way, his nerves taut, eyes sharp for any sign of pursuit. Selena held the map Octavia had given her, memorizing every turn and exit. Philadelphus, calm but alert, noted the patterns of movement and potential escape routes should the ambush be real. Rome had shifted from a city of intrigue to a stage for survival.
Remember, the eyes are everywhere. The loyal servant caution. One wrong move, and the consequences will ripple far beyond you.
In a sudden twist, the ambush turned out to be more than a test. It was a warning. A masked figure confronted them in a dim alley, brandishing a folded blade. Alexander Helios stepped forward, defiance flashing in his eyes, while Selene's calmness countered the panic, guiding them to safety through a cleverly hidden exit. The encounter ended without bloodshed, but the message was clear. Their enemies were not idle, and Rome's shadows were alive with danger. As they finally returned to the safety of Octavia's residence, hearts pounding and breaths ragged, the children understood a harsh truth. Survival would demand unity, intelligence, and courage beyond their years. And somewhere in the dark streets of Rome, the architects of this ambush were already plotting the next move. One that could forever alter the fates of Cleopatra's heirs. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the distant echoes of Rome's restless streets. Cleopatra Selene, Alexander Helios, and Ptolemy Philadelphus had returned to Octavia's residence, hearts still racing from the encounter that had tested their courage and wits. Shadows lingered in the corners, as if Rome itself watched them, waiting for the next moment of weakness.
You have done well, Octavia said, gathering the children around the fire. Tonight was only the beginning. The streets are alive with those who would see you harmed. Yet your minds are sharp and your unity stronger than you know.
Cleopatra Selene's eyes reflected the flickering flames, her mind racing through the night's events. Alexander Helios, restless as ever, fidgeted with a piece of parchment, still brimming with questions and plans for action. Philadelphus, serene and calculating, catalogued every detail of the ambush, every expression, every hesitation of the masked assailant. They were no longer mere children. They were young strategists, heirs to a legacy fraught with peril and intrigue.
They will be ready, muttered the old soldier who had guided them, not just to survive, but to navigate the treacherous currents of Rome's power. Even Octavian himself would hesitate against minds so trained.
The letter from the envoy remained in Selene's hands, a symbol of both threat and opportunity. Hidden within its cryptic phrases lay hints of alliances, of power plays that could be leveraged. Octavia encouraged them to decipher these messages carefully, to turn fear into foresight, and to see Rome's schemes not just as dangers, but as lessons in strategy and resilience.
Remember, Octavia whispered, the eyes of Rome are everywhere, yet so are the minds of those who will defend you. Together, you are stronger than any plot, any threat that lingers in the shadows.
Outside, the streets whispered with rumors, and unseen hands continued their maneuvers. The children knew that survival was a delicate balance of caution, courage, and cunning. Each moment, each choice, each glance could tip the scales of their fragile safety. The lessons of the night were clear. Rome's darkness was vast, but their unity, intelligence, and the guidance of Octavia offered a light, however fragile, in which to navigate the coming storm.
The heirs of Cleopatra, the old soldier murmured, carry not just a legacy of royalty, but the seeds of strategy, resilience, and power that may one day reshape the world they inherit.
As the first light of dawn crept over the city, the children looked toward the future with determination. They had faced threats, learned the intricacies of hidden politics, and discovered the strength within themselves and each other. Yet the shadow of Rome's ambition loomed large, promising that their journey was far from over. Somewhere in the heart of the city, forces were already moving to challenge their resolve once more, an unseen hand that would define the next chapter of their lives. And so, the story of Cleopatra's lost children closed its first chapter with hearts tempered by fear, minds sharpened by intrigue, and bonds of trust forged in the fire of adversity. But the echoes of Rome's schemes would soon carry them further into a world where survival demanded brilliance, courage, and unyielding unity.